Hi, my name is Ritesh Bawri. I'm an entrepreneur and also the father of two wonderful children. Interestingly, I'm also someone who's almost died 14 times in my life. From being in a near plane crash to being lost in a jungle, I've seen it all. 7 years ago, I experienced what was hopefully my last near-death experience. I just turned 40. I was diabetic, I was hypertensive, had always suffered from asthma, and I had acidity for at least 20 years. Thanks to the intervention of Professor Ravi Rajan, I was able to reverse all these conditions in 90 days. I was hooked. I had to learn more. Since then, I've read thousands of medical journals and hundreds of books. I've certified myself in physiology from the Harvard Medical School and in nutrition from the Tufts Medical School. I just had to understand what was happening in the human body. I've started Breathe Again, a platform dedicated to helping people live a very long and a very healthy life. We've been able to impact thousands of people, reverse lifestyle conditions. You know, the really interesting thing is that even the World Health Organization calls lifestyle diseases potentially reversible. Are we saying that if you just simply made some lifestyle changes, 7 of the top 10 reasons why we're dying could be reversed, or at least the risk could be reduced? To find out more, I put together the Ritesh Bawri Show, where we talk to experts and regular people, understand from them what's going on with their lives, and how all of us can live a very long and a very healthy life. Welcome to the show, the Ritesh Bawri Show. I'm really happy, I'm blessed, I'm honored. Padma, welcome to the show.
And I also didn't understand what psychological trauma is, because as a happy kid, like you dance and then you're a happy person.
Sure.
I was 55 and turned 86 in a year. And in spite of my varied efforts, at the cost of also affecting my social life, not meeting people, wearing the same clothes, all of that drudgery, for a person who's never been heavy and unfit, to lead that life was something you didn't know.
Yeah.
And nobody taught you. And whenever Jasmine would tell me to lead an alternate life, I would say that you're not leading it, so you don't understand it.
Exactly, yeah.
But he was very patient with it, and he let me go until I think it was good time to intervene. Even before I connected with you, I started my fitness journey, right? And it took me like 6 to 7 months. I had an amazing Dishant, who during COVID took the chance of coming to my house every day. And he was so patient, because I was like, I want to start doing 100 squats. That's what I used to do.
Yeah.
And he was like, you can't do it. And I started understanding my limits, because I couldn't even do 20. Like I couldn't even do 10 squats. Yeah. It took me 3 months to first get my muscles stronger before I could even do anything called a fitness regime.
Yeah.
To not being able to lose weight, and then lost weight, lost about 5-6 kilos, came down to 78, and then again shuttled back to 85, 84. Until then we met you.
Sure.
And now, of course, my food plans are made by you.
Sure.
And I think we do keep having our tussles of... but I mean, if I were to be given a choice, I don't know how everybody's health journeys are in different spaces. Everybody has different health challenges, as I realize. Some which are muscular, some which are nerves. And there are all kinds of things. As we see our parents aging, you start understanding how complex and wonderful your body is. Yeah. I am still at 68 after a year and a half of being with you. Year now?
Yeah.
Great journey. I mean, if you look at it from where we were, I mean, it's still a long way to go. And you remember my 2 months.
Yeah.
1 month I give you. Time is up. Yeah. And to the time now when you say, okay, fine.
I've gotten to know you in that process.
You've gotten to know me. So now I would say is that, I mean, I think you need to indulge and understand what your body is, and you need to find, especially if you're not able to deal with it, then actually do find help.
Sure.
Because it's a complex space.
It is, yeah.
And as simple your body is, that complex it is. It's weird. I've also learned a few things with you, especially that if you focus on the micros, your macros get right.
Sort it out, yeah.
So, you know, as of today, I mean, food, so you have only been making our weekly plans, which also I keep altering.
Sure.
For reasons you know. But with respect to fitness, because, you know, I think you asked a question earlier on, on the signs of dance and, you know, the pressure of, because I've seen my body perform in a certain way, my ability to do certain things with a certain body weight, and I'm so used to that. And my expectations have still not grown. I think one major change that I have been forcing myself to put through, and I hope I don't have to for a very long time, is that to be realistic about your fitness regime. And there are days when you may be able to like run 10 kilometers. I still actually, there's this park which I go to on every Saturday and go for a long run there. And there are all kinds of runners and walkers and, autistic people, all kinds of people who come.
Sure.
One of the great things about that, what I go every day is like, one is to say that you see people like really fit people like running like super uber cool, passing through you, and you're like, oh my shit, like this is like I've hardly started and I'm already like lagging behind. And then you find autistic kids, people in their wheelchairs, just being there for themselves and their health. And then you constantly tell yourself that push yourself as much as you want to, and make sure that that's not. It's very difficult to arrive at that line. I'm not saying it's easy.
Exactly.
And you need to constantly keep assessing. But I think as you have to really assess that. Because for me, as an athlete, as a dancer who has always challenged her body, I find it very difficult when I can't get to doing what I can. Because I know that that's how my body can look and do and those kind of motions. And sometimes you cannot be unreal with your body and you need to come to terms with it. And this may apply to even a person who's not an athlete, because you have a different motion regime. Everybody has their own motion patterns. So when there are changes which are physically detrimental happening to your body, it's important to recognize that you create a fitness regime that adapts to it in a way that you're not cheating, but still pushing yourself. The second thing I've noticed and recognized about my regime, and it's not new, but I think off late a little more because you have limits to what you can do with your body, is that you need to understand from time to time your body is going to respond to the same fitness workout differently.
Correct.
Or even similar. So a 10K run last weekend would
may
be
not
great.
Be the same as this one,
As long as you've pushed yourself in a way that you're not going to injure yourself, it's okay. It's a lot of energy, investment of time and thought to be in touch with your body. But once you're in sync with it, it's amazing. That's what determines your fitness routine. I think that's extremely important. As a woman, we go through our monthly cycles. We have all kinds of hormonal imbalances. I've always had that. I knew even during, sometimes as dancers, even at the, in the worst of period cycles, you have to go and perform 3-hour performance and you just do it. It's a physical routine and you do it. And somehow your body does
responds,
it because of. But I also aware that there are times when my mind says no, and I'm going to let go with it because it needs to be fed with that. That's where I feel it's useful to have people like Jasmine, or you should have somebody who is working with you and keeping it real and saying that, hey, maybe you should just come out for a stroll. Maybe you don't want to do a 10K. You don't want to do a 21K today. Maybe you don't want to do an HIIT with the best trainer. And that's okay. Or you don't want to go boxing or doing crazy things. I'm so sorry. I mean, I know I speak like this, but even for people who are just walking 2 kilometers and are not able to do that, I have been through that. So I'm just saying that it's okay. It's as long as you have to move. It's what your body is made for. And sometimes your hormones, especially as a woman, is as much as a part of that movement process. And so it's okay to say no, but then learn to put a full stop to that no sometime, and always find friends, partners who can kind of support you through this journey. Because sometimes you can't do it all alone, especially if you're in that space where you're unhealthy and you have certain health goals to achieve. And even otherwise, I'm sure.
Now, there are actually a bunch of things that you said. Like one thing that you said, which I think is really important, is this notion of finding someone who can help you. Because I've seen, in the limited time that I've been in this space, I've seen horror stories, literally, of people who've just completely gone wrong because, they had this aspiration minus the knowledge. And they made very poor choices, and then kidney, liver, thyroid, all kinds of things started getting messed up. So I think that need to find that expertise is important. The other thing that I think that you said was very useful is this whole notion of not living up to, in some sense, social media, where you see people who are always acing ultra marathon and having run back-to-back marathons and done all kinds of things. And maybe it's okay for them, and maybe it's not okay for you. And if you are going to start judging yourself against those expectations, I think, again, I see lots of people just driving themselves nuts. And then what happens, unfortunately, is this very binary outcome. So you aspire and you fail, and then you just give up, and that's it. So then now your entire health process has gone for a toss. So I think what I try to profess a lot is just taking small baby steps. Those baby steps could be an inch, it could be a foot, it could be a mile. It doesn't really matter. Pick, whatever distance works for you. But take those steps forward. But at the same time, take it, like you said, in a manner that's conducive to you, as opposed to, whatever you're seeing on social media. I think that's extremely important. But tell me about like substances. So a lot of people I know in the industry, it's common, like I'll tell you my own story. There was a time when we were running a cement business, and one of the people we were looking at as being our brand ambassador was Shah Rukh Khan. And I spent about an hour with him, and he was just chain smoking through the entire 1 hour. I don't know what he does. I don't know him well enough. But like if I just took from that story and said smoking, for example, is a mild form of substance abuse because your metabolism does slow down when you smoke, to probably using many more substances that slow down your metabolism, don't allow you to feel hunger. Talk me through that. Is that something that happens? Is that something that, what's your thought on that? What happens?
I think substance use or abuses, they're all over the world, regardless of profession.
Sure.
I honestly have never substance abused. I like my alcohol sometimes in certain ways, in certain moments, in certain gatherings. I'm not obsessed about it. I came from a family, like an army background. I've grown up with alcohol all around me. I was told what old monk is when when I was hardly 12, 13, good or bad. And I've still been able to maintain. I'm from the cinema space. Actually, myself and your wife were speaking, right? And then like saying how judgmental the southern industry, and I used to go for film fairs and stuff, like, and if you till about say 5-6 years back, if in the gatherings as a woman you ended up drinking, which was very common for me, social drinking was normal, you have different kind of connotations attached compared to say in Bombay or the Bombay film industry where it's probably a norm. I don't think it's a function of the film industry per se. It may be a little more because it seems stressful, and also for some reason access to a lot of things, not just substances. At the peak of my career, I'm just trying to, like, now I'll have 4 or 5 films slated, but the time when I've took a break is when I realized the amount of things I had access to when I was a star. It just comes to you like that. Like, somebody will just come and give you expensive coats, expensive holidays. You want it, you don't want it. And then you actually start getting used to it. Matter of fact, I was at NYU, I was like, why doesn't just somebody get this done for me? It was so strange for me coming from a, lower middle class family to suddenly have these weird expectations. I mean, I didn't come from a thoroughbred rich family or anything, and when I was in the midst of the Sandy hurricane, and I was rendered homeless. I was in the East Village, my house flooded, and I had to go and stay in a camp, and I was like, I'm not going to stand in a queue to get food. As privileged that it may seem today, but the fact is that especially as an actor, because you're in the entertainment space and people idolize you in a certain way, they love you and they like to pamper you, they make you get used to certain things, and of course the pressure to perform in a public space is very high. Undoubtedly, as much as I'm trying to say that success and failure does affect everybody, and that kind of expectation is much higher for an actor because it affects so many other people's lives and economies. It's not just yours. I'm sure that's true for an industrialist who owns an enterprise, but that pressure is always there. And you want your story and you want your baby to deliver every time. So, I mean, and that's why I said the stakes for a Shah Rukh is so much more higher. I mean, I would love to be in a space that kind of stakes has not been given to me because of my gender. But those could be reasons, but I don't think substance abuse is really a function of entertainment. A particular industry. And norms that you set for yourself, what you want to do, what you don't want to do, when you want to do them, and judging them is something that you should do for yourself. And you should know that even if it's social drinking, when you have alcohol, certain things happen to your liver. It does these little tricks. But it's okay, it also does a few things to your mind. And maybe that'll outdo what it does to your liver. But those are the kind of trade-offs you make in life, right? It's about trading off and saying, okay, I may just choose to have that French fry and not be able to stretch myself that much better tomorrow. But those are, I mean, French fries, especially in McDonald's oil, I don't know if I'm going to be thrown out, but I don't mind. Never want to be one of those brand ambassadors. But I think norms like this we all should recognize that the planet Earth and the body is all part of nature's giving, like it or not. How much ever medical science progresses, you cannot defy the fact that we are a marvel. And sometimes the less you try and understand, it's good. The more you try and understand, it's good. And it's important that you engage and indulge in that process of submerging in the lack of knowledge and the knowledge of it.
Sure.
So and that's what I think about substance. I'm just coming from a naturopathy place, and I became friends with a very nice girl who was 135 kilos. And it was so difficult for her to be inside the ashram. I was enjoying my food. I was like, wow, I don't like salt. So I'm like, there is no salt. I would actually go and complain to the doctor. I think you guys put an extra ounce of salt. So knowing me, right? But she was, poor thing, making excuses to go out and have the vada pav. It's in Maharashtra where the center was. And at some point I was like, I mean, that's addiction too.
Yeah, it is.
And you may want to judge it, but I don't know if judging it, and as long as she recognizes it, and it's psychological, and it's not just physiological. And it's interesting how all of this mind body, it's like so complex. I don't even know what I'm saying right now. But at the end, it's a norm that you set for yourself, and it's helpful if you try and educate yourself, but not be belligerent by that knowledge and say that, okay, there are things which are beyond my understanding as well. And sometimes letting it go as per what the flow says is good.
Sure. A couple of things. So one is, I've actually read quite a bit on the alcohol bit. And I think the unfortunate truth is that no amount of alcohol is actually good for you.
Yes.
I know there are people who talk about resveratrol and all of that.
Even if it does good to your head.
It actually doesn't even do good to your head, unfortunately.
Okay.
It's so actually...
To my soul.
Even a little bit of alcohol.
Can you counter the soul?
No, unfortunately it doesn't. So the science stacks up. Even a little bit actually goes and destroys the neurons in your brain.
Okay.
Forget what it does to your liver.
Okay, so everyone, alcohol is bad.
So ideally should not. But, again, I'd leave that choice to everyone. You should do whatever is good for you. The science is clear. The alcohol is not really good for you.
I think our biggest grouse, myself and Jasmine's bigger grouse, was we have a little bar.
Yeah.
And that didn't move for the first 2 months. And we had bought an entire crate of sugarless Red Bull.
Yeah.
And we was like, it's summer and we want to have the sugarless Red Bull. And we're like, oh my God, it's still there. I think it's probably gone out of date right now.
Perhaps. Yeah. So, I really want to go back to some of the things that you talked about a little bit earlier about food, nutrition, and you talked about how we work together, and thank you for that. Culture plays a big role in the choices you make in terms of what you eat. And what I see happen is you can say anything you want, but ultimately a person's bias always ends up being towards what they've always eaten. The interesting thing is you can actually eat a balanced meal, which is kind of what you really need to eat, the macros and the micros, regardless of culture, because your body doesn't know you're Marwari, you're Tamil, or Punjabi, or Assamese, or Chinese. You've obviously sort of used culture a lot. You come from a particular culture of eating a certain way. And I know we keep having these conversations about why can't it be this or why can't it be that. Talk me through that. Just talk me through what you're thinking, and maybe we can debate a little bit about perhaps how I approach this and the way you think this through.
To everyone who doesn't know us, just to educate them, my biggest pain point when we and I think you had warned us, but I didn't understand
enough.
Because I was already experimental enough, right? Like in the sense, myself and Jasmine used to salad lunches. We are used to, we love blue cheese, which is a rarity. Like we love hard cheeses.
Sure.
None of this was I was super shocked because I was like, isn't it possible to actually attain all of that?
Yeah.
Actually, that's a question I always have for you, and I will keep having. I know there are certain things like avocado, which is difficult to find as a replacement.
Sure.
But, and that's some part of that question actually goes back to you.
Yeah.
Do you really need to have broccoli in summer?
Sure.
Or cauliflower? Because I can't grow it. For nuts, I can't grow it. If I can't grow it, then if I'm not seeing it, then why am I consuming it?
Yeah.
I also feel like there is a reason to it. Your metabolism is different during summers and rains than winters. You can digest more fibrous things like cauliflower and broccoli much more easily in winter than otherwise. And the quality of the cauliflower, like the way it cooks so fast.
Yeah.
Even assuming just for nutritional reasons. I'm also an environmentalist, and I'm not trying to be like adding an ism to it, but there is a certain rhythm in which nature works.
Yeah.
If you can find an alternate to it in such a way that it is sustainable, I'm fine with it, but I don't know if we have.
Sure.
So in the circumstances that we have not, I do have trouble eating things which are not seasonal. I do have trouble eating things which are not local. So this is something which actually grew probably from my family. As you said, it's very early.
Cultural,
right?
Yeah, sure.
Very cultural in a sense. My grandmother was infamously famous for using everything about a vegetable. Literally, otherwise also I come from that part of the Southern Indian community where where we don't leave any part of the banana tree.
Sure.
Jimmican ka jo cover hota hai, like the thick brown cover which people normally very, just make some delicious chutneys out of it.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And highly fibrous. And of course, I mean, there are different issues today like pesticides, blah, 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 all of that, which may be the reasons why we started discarding them and therefore lost those recipes which came with it. But somehow that kind of got inculcated. So my mom kind of continued that the lesser waste you have. And it was not just that, it's also the way of cooking. So we would not use more than 2 to 3 utensils to make the same thing. And we're also Southern Indianers. In a way, we eat with a hand very happily compared to North of India. We don't know what the spoon is. And the use of cutlery is actually so much in a house has just come into my life after I got married to Jasmine, who's a Gujarati. But in my house, kadai mein banaya, to kadai hi, jaake table mein aayega, and that is only served. So for me, like conservation was something which was, I think, was very inherently in my system in a much deeper way. I think that's there in the Indian ecosystem generally.
It is,
But in my house, I think there's just way too much of it. And then I'm very close to nature. I love nature. I'm a nature animal. You put me in a forest or a water, like a beach or something, I'm a happy kid. Put me in a city, I'm not. Just right opposite to my husband, who's an urban animal. And that's how I studied environmental law. And I went into naturopathy when, in very early 20s, like I was hardly 21 when I went into naturopathy, and I told the doctor, very, very learned, blessed to have her in my life, Dr. Satyalakshmi. So I went into the naturopathy center and I said, I don't want to be gluttonous. And I was just like, she put me on a 10-day water fast.
Okay.
I'll tell you, like the first thing that I had was a pomegranate, and there were 10 pomegranates, and I was like, this is so precious. And that's the time I realized, A, how much food and energy do we really need? B, if we are over-consuming, 80%, so I did a food policy course when I was at NYU doing my master. I mean, it was not out of anything but just interest. That's when I came to know about the slow food movement and the kind of what meat lovers are doing in the slow food movement, and the fact that 80% of deforestation happens because of agriculture. So if you feel that, you're a vegetarian, so you're doing good to the planet, no. There was a very interesting simulation which my professor at NYU had done. The entire class of like 60, 70 people were blogged into different countries. And then there was this UN convention, and there was someone giving them climate carbon points, and no matter what negotiation, basically the negotiation was to arrive at a certain agreeable emission limit, and for a certain amount of carbon credits. So it's like economy versus environment argument, right? And no matter what kind of math you did, it didn't fit.
Interesting.
Unless you reduced the consumption.
Right.
Unless all the countries, and not one country, unless all the countries within that table, in that simulation, agreed to it. And that was the point he was driving through the course, that no matter how much you try, unless you're consuming less, you're not going to change your story. That's, of course, there are people who will say that I don't care, there is, what happens to my future generations is no concern to me.
Correct.
All of that is fine, but we do realize that our quality of life has dramatically reduced. In the process of trying to consume more, we've done harm to our bodies. Clearly, two decades back, I didn't need a nutritionist. I need a nutritionist today. I need to be very aware, like you are eating so much of pesticides that you are doing a lot of harm. You're actually probably affecting your metabolism far more. So you may be getting everything right, and you're still getting everything wrong. And which is where I feel, so the reason why pesticides are there is because if you want to grow cauliflower in certain conditions, then you have to put certain things which makes them grow, exactly like large-scale animal production. So in many which ways, it's not like I'm a big-time farmer like some of my other friends, like Neha and their other farmer friends, but the more you farm, the more you are closer to nature, you realize that certain preconditions, like suddenly bees have disappeared, so I can't grow beans in my house. And that's happened because of the pollution levels in Delhi. And it was there 2 years back. And I'm like seeing it. I'm seeing these changes.
The changes,
And so as much as we we keep saying, oh my God, non-vegetarians, and this is this large-scale animal production is bad for health. These eggs are bad for health. We never talk about humane farming practice,
exactly,
which is actually causing maximum degradation. And so, if we're talking about humane farming practice, it means you have to grow local, eat local, eat just what your body needs, eat the right stuff in the right seasons, do the kind of things which your body requires to do to eliminate those wastes, and not demand more. So this kind of a consumerist society that we are in, it's strange, like you were talking about your daughter ending up going to school and was never exposed to biscuits
Yeah.
and was forced to be fed biscuits because
Correct.
everybody else was eating biscuits.
Yeah.
And that kind of forced consumerism is not taking us anywhere.
Correct.
Not as individuals and definitely not as a community.
Yeah.
It's scary, but that's the standpoint. It's not philosophical. I mean, you really have to be close to nature. It's like this, the minute the water started coming in our taps, you stop forgetting that there is a source for that water.
Yeah,
it's coming
exactly.
from somewhere.
Exactly.
It's not like you have unlimited access to it.
Yeah.
Just like oil,
Yeah.
just like coal, just like trees, just like anything. So if you want to express gratitude of any kinds, switch off those fans, switch off those ACs, sweat yourself out a bit because that's natural. And if you don't do that, what will happen is I'll be forced to switch on the AC to cool myself because you're switching it on and therefore I have to switch it on to survive.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very cyclical process and we'll have to work on it as a community. And I feel like we take it, instead of arguing that I am the country who has suffered and you are the developed country who is not, you have benefited for the last 100 years.
I think we're beyond that actually.
Now we are way beyond that. We can't keep continuing the cyclical conversations as individuals because it's doing harm to me.
Yeah.
And I know that my metabolism, I'm very young relative to like my parents at 80 have a 77, my father is.
More healthy.
He has a fair touch wood. I mean, they've zero health stats issues. Their metabolism is like they eat like 10 times.
Anything,
my grandfather, when he died at 101, he had a much stronger eating capacity.
Correct.
And that means your digestive systems are working very well.
Yeah. I want to come back to this topic, but very quickly I want to touch about the question that you asked about the seasonality.
Yeah.
So as you know, we built this entire platform which is able to sort of in some sense curate what the ideal sort of food mix should look like. And we actually did a lot of research, like, we talked to friends, we talked to other people we knew, we talked to people in the farming community. And the surprising thing I learned is this notion of seasonality, barring those who maybe are growing their own vegetables, actually doesn't exist. Because carrots, for example, are grown through the year. Perhaps there's a growing season. They say December, January is the growing season. But carrots are grown through the year. They're available through the year. And if I were to tell someone, listen, come July, you're not supposed to be eating carrots because they're not seasonal. They're like, no, but they're, they're in my market. So I think this notion of seasonality has got so distorted that only very discerning people now truly understand it. Yes. And then when you're trying to profess seasonality, actually you're looked at as though you're completely nuts, right? So I think first, the awareness has to come back. I think this term is thrown around a lot.
Yes.
You know what you're saying, but I think for the most part, most people don't know what they're saying. They're just saying seasonal because that's a term that they've used or heard, and they're trying to be seasonal, but what they're getting is, probably made last year and kept in a frozen, so
it's also very interesting. Those people will go and have frozen berries any which way.
Yeah, exactly.
And those are choices you make, fine. I mean, fair enough. But actually, that comes back to a question that I have for you, that as a nutritionist, I'm so sorry if this is not in the format of the deal, but like if you look at it culturally also, like, the more I introspect into food, because I've spent so much time on it, not that I understand it fully, and I don't know if I'll be able to understand it as much as you have, but I know from my childhood, like my parents have come from a certain part of South India which actually cooks very, very healthily.
Sure.
And we've always had this thing that, this entire 4-plate thing that you have more veggies, you have this much rice.
Correct.
It's always been part of our system. You know what my parents eat, and that's what I've grown. We've eaten gourds of all kinds. As kid, I've never had any restriction on vegetables, and I've seen most people around me, including my brother, never having any fuss. And even now, therefore, I actually crave for vegetables. When I went to the US, I was like, there are no gourds here. People don't eat gourds. People don't eat snake gourd. Like, you don't even see snake gourd for years. And I'm like, how is that even possible? That sometimes, like, when we prescribe nutritional diets, like by saying this is Mediterranean, so this is, this is great.
Yeah.
Or like, you have a chickpea fritto. Do these kind of things kind of create a certain fad, or is it something which is important for you to be able to bring people to the space where it's maybe difficult to like convince them to eating what they're eating regularly the right way? So is it a way to kind of change their habits and then bring them back to a certain homeostasis state? Or like, why is it that one has to go through this process of...
There are actually quite a few questions in your question. First is, let me answer the cultural thing. What I learned over the last 7-8 years is there are all kinds of people. There are people who only eat multi-ethnic, multicultural cuisines, and unless they do that, they don't feel satisfied. I'd say 90% of the people I've met actually like that dal chawal roti sabzi. That's what their predilection is toward. There are a couple of things that actually play into this. One is when you compare this to what your grandparents were doing, the soil conditions were very different. Talk to any farmer and they will tell you the condition of the soil is very different. So when you ate a fruit or a vegetable, the micronutrients that you got were very different.
Very different.
So the magnesium, the vitamin A, etc. So that was very different. The other thing that I see is radically changed is the exposure to toxins, plastic in particular. So you take a 6-month-old child and you take a 30-year-old man or woman, it doesn't really matter. The kind of exposure that you're getting to toxicity is so much, plastic in particular, and that's completely disrupting your hormonal system, disrupting your digestion, disrupting in some sense your ability to absorb. So then you're forced to have a spirulina maybe from Hawaii or to have a Brazil nut from somewhere else, because otherwise there is no way to get that in your local cuisine. So I think there are a few things that you need, vitamin B12 and D3 clearly being two. I think in certain cases you need a spirulina. It's a great anxiety reliever, for example. I think I would do it just because it did that, regardless whether it was grown locally in my village or not. Obviously, the fact that you don't get every single thing that you need, that really matters. But I'd say 90% of what you eat can be local, can be cultural, can be to your taste, can be to your palate. It really doesn't matter. But at the same time, just because it's not local, I would also not do the few things that perhaps is just making sure that you're in balance. So I found that being able to blend,
in spite of the fact that the carbon footprint may be high.
Yes, so of course there's a price you pay for every choice you make, as long as it's the smaller things, and let's say the bulk of what's on your plate is coming from preferably local. So I wouldn't ask you to eat blueberries from Michigan, which is where I went to school. It's just insane to be importing.
So delicious.
It is, but it's also insane to be importing blueberries from Michigan to Calcutta and having them. There are enough things locally you can get there. As saffron, for example, is a great antioxidant. Cinnamon's a great antioxidant, locally available in Sri Lanka. So it's not like you don't have choices there, but then there are certain things where I think you almost absolutely have to.
It's interesting you call Sri Lanka local.
I mean, it's not that far if you compare like getting something from Michigan versus getting something from Sri Lanka. I'd say relatively speaking, that distance that you're traversing is much less. So I think these are all choices you're making. 90% of it can be whatever you want. And then, situation dependent. For example, the fact that you don't eat selenium leads to prostate cancer in men and breast cancer in women. So now imagine I have to eat a Brazil nut because that's one thing that has a lot of selenium. I would do it just simply because of that reason. The carbon footprint price I would pay, if you will, of having gotten, breast cancer or prostate cancer is far greater than the carbon footprint price that I'm paying for importing that selenium from somewhere. So I think these are trade-offs.
This is like going to go into like my food policy course class.
Exactly. Yeah. So I just want to very, very narrow point that I want to make. 95% of what you're eating can definitely be local, cultural. There's no problem. But there are a few things that help just make sure that you're in balance. And if that's a choice you need to make, you might as well just make it.
That's and also probably not hoard on Brazil nuts because you want
exactly. Exactly. Absolutely.
Which is what ends up happening when it becomes the in thing.
Exactly. Let me change topics a little bit. We talked about food, we talked about importing, we talked about a lot of this. One of the things that also seems to happen is when people endorse. So let's say I said selenium on this course, I said on this show, I talked about Brazil nuts. I know lots of people are going to go out and buy it, and I'm nobody, frankly. In the universe of people who are well known, I'm practically unknown. But there are famous people who actually do say things. Go out and eat this, go out and buy that, go out and do this and go out and do that. And then you see people follow. At least as a citizen, forget whatever little knowledge I have. At least when I look at it, I said, dude, there's no way you're eating that, or there's no way you're consuming that. What's your thought on that? Like, should people with a certain fame endorse things and endorse things that need not necessarily be good for you?
I'm very torn apart. I don't have a single straight yes or no.
Okay.
I mean, I feel conflicted even if I have to do a, Pothys ad, because then you're like basically saying that people go and splurge your money on something which is probably not required.
Yeah.
So, the level of conflict can be.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, like if you look at it from a celebrity's perspective, right? Like, I know they may think it's easy money, but trust me, like, the life of any celebrity, whether they're an actor or a sports person, is very expensive and very short. And not so much for an actor, but it is very tumultuous, definitely. And therefore, you want to make the most of what you have at a certain point. And if something, it's exactly the choice between whether I should choose Brazil nuts or having breast cancer. I mean, maybe sounds very dramatic,
Yeah.
but it does get very dramatic at that point. Like,
Sure.
I don't want to do a pothis ad and force people to spend money on their weddings and like, lavishly when you're not going to use that sari ever again in life, and that's that's environmentally unsustainable. So why am I going doing that?
Yeah.
But if you don't do it, somebody else is going to do it.
Correct.
And so you're like, okay, I'm letting go. And it's also like, both like today, because marketing has become such an important aspect, unfortunately, of our lives, the more the visible you are, the more
Opportunities you get. Yeah.
But because there is that perception, there is always this pressure that, okay, kuch nahi to, even if you're not doing it for money, let's just do it for like, if you get a Coke endorsement.
Yeah. What would you do?
I mean, it's a big company, it's a big brand. You're going to get huge visibility. They're going to put you all over the countryside. I'm like, am I going to say no to it?
Correct.
It's a very difficult choice. And for me, invariably, it's time to time, I make those choices based on where I am.
Yeah.
As people who are digesting things in the visual, whether it's a film, whether it's an ad film.
Yeah.
In ad film, it's even more because I'm the storyteller and I'm taking responsibility for it. Filter your information. It's not necessarily that person is trying to sell it to you because they want you to buy it or they believe in it.
Yeah.
And therefore, you should stop being a fan of theirs. I think you should look at it as to what does it do for me?
Sure.
And like, if going and eating a McDonald's burger is... At the end, if you don't pass the buck on the person who's so I would say that at the end of the day, it's
you're making that choice.
You're making that choice.
Yeah.
And if you're making that choice because you saw an ad, then it's your problem as much. So the burden is definitely on the consumer.
Sure.
Having said that, we know that marketing has a purpose, and that is there's the subliminal conscience which is working, and humans do work that way, and that's why marketing exists. There's no so. As people who are trying to profess it, see if it's really required and you're just adding to your bank balance recklessly, may not be worth it.
Sure.
And if you're able to take that stand that I don't care a damn, then
do it.
Then 200 marks to you. I mean, I back you up all the way.
Sure.
But to say that confusion doesn't exist and it's not for real and I haven't faced it and it may seem different for a sari brand versus a fairness cream versus wine. I mean, like, am I going to be like doing the wrong thing by endorsing something like that? It's a difficult choice, and know you're treading it and don't abuse it.
Sure.
So I think it's all a matter of finding that balance both ways.
Sure. Which brings me to the final question I want to ask you, which is that all of us, in some sense, are also processing who we are. Our personality, there's a journey, right? I'm discovering who I am. I find new facets about who I am on an ongoing basis. And then depending on what I discover, I try to process it, understand it, deal with it, cope with it in many ways. An actor's role is to sort of immerse themselves into the role that you're playing. You are a good actor only when you're fully immersed. You are that person that you're trying to portray, which can oftentimes be diametrically opposite to the person you are. So you could be playing a role that's completely different, and you immerse yourself into that role. What happens? Like, what happens in your head? Do you become that new person? Do you come back and just shed all of it and move on? How do you process all of it? Does it make you better? Does it make you more conflicted? What happens? I'm just very curious.
Maybe because I have been playing varied personalities, like even dancing is acting. So I have been staging characters from very young. So it comes second nature to me. But I also love it for varied reasons. One is that acting is not like, okay, I got a script today and now I have to adapt myself into this character and I switch. No. So as I'm sitting here and I'm observing you, and I've picked some of your physical, emotional traits and I have embedded it in my database.
Interesting.
And then I actually, like, when I'm doing my daily activities, even when I'm dancing, even with my gym trainers, there are certain movements with Dishant. I'm like,
oh, very interesting. Yeah, sure.
Especially with Dishant. I mean, some of his movements were so graceful. Like, I'm like, I'm going to use this in my thing.
Oh, interesting.
It does, like, I mean, movements, you get inspiration for movements, you get inspiration for, certain peculiarities. Today, when I was actually coming to the airport, somebody was like coming to pick up my luggage, right? When you come to the baggage space. There's a guy who's walking like this.
Yeah.
If you saw it in a film, you'd be like, this is so unreal.
Yeah.
But he's literally like, he's like this.
Yeah.
And I was like, I would have loved to have a conversation with him if time permitted, but it was interesting for me to see that. And I would probably use that somewhere based on my interpretation of it. So I feel like an actor's journey is always observational. It's not like, okay, aaj role aa gaya hai, to ye kar lenge.
Right.
Then you get a role.
Yeah.
Then you're like, okay, these are things in my database. I picked up these things.
Correct.
What if this can fit and still look real to my body?
Yeah.
Because maybe what you may have a particular habit which may not suit my aesthetic, my body structure, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So even if I try to ape it, it may not work for me. So then it's making those balanced choices. But I have only learned, I mean, those are like more technical things, but like physical things. But the physical is always connected to your mind. So all my films and all my characters have in many ways only made me learn. Because what happens when you're playing a character is you start getting observational, you start dissecting that person. There's always a method behind it. So when you work on every scene, you're like, why? What is the motivation? What's the reason? If they don't have a motivation, then it's random behavior. Whatever it is, you keep attributing certain things.
Sure.
You arrive at your own storyline, which hopefully is in sync with the directors. So you keep making those multiple sub-stories, right? And after you do that, you start realizing there are so many things about this individual because it's a story. It's always in relationship with another person. And then it's also the way the director sees it, the way you co-actor sees it, and then you treat it differently.
Yeah.
In the process, you see that the same person with certain qualities in certain circumstances behaves in certain ways.
Yeah.
And then when sometimes you're hit with those scenarios, you're like, okay, now...
I could have done this. Yeah.
You know, it's very easy for us to get into the observational and non-observational space. At the same time, it also makes us very emotional.
Yeah.
Therefore, we have a very stronger intuitive sense. I mean, at least I feel like if you're a good actor, if you're a dancer, if you're an artist, you survive on your intuitions. Really.
Yeah.
So if your intuitions are that strong, you are that emotional and sensitive as well. So sometimes, and that's something which normal people don't, like regular people who are not in the art space don't understand. But people who are artists are like, they connect and they thrive on that sensitivity and sensitivity.
So in some sense, you're almost saying like every role you play is like reading a book about someone, and you're learning from playing that role and imbibing certain aspects of that character.
Except that you become the book itself.
Yeah, exactly. Fascinating. But this is truly fascinating. But you don't see that ending up creating conflict in your head, or finding it difficult to sort of unwind or sort of
It leaves a little bit of it to you, and then you move on.
Right. There's no character that's ever messed up your head completely.
No.
Okay.
But I mean, and you learn, right? Like, especially when I was doing like Parashi Raja, which was one of the first wars of so many first wars of Indian independence. But then I learned about Neeli, about the entire tribal space in Wayanad, and there. So every time I travel there and I find some semblance of that history, there's this automatic connect. And I've only had great memories. I mean, I had played a street beggar's role, and because the role required me to be like, I was a street beggar. I was dirty. So every time they would make me dirty.
Yeah.
So there was no point in having a bath.
Yeah.
Because when we were shooting such heavy schedules, hectic schedules, when I first had my bath after 3 days, I kind of knew the value of a bath.
Exactly.
And so when I look at a street beggar, I don't look at it the way like everybody
Most
does.
people would, yeah, sure.
So it does leave behind things, but it leaves behind, like if you're not doing it too often, then you miss it a lot. But I haven't seen it doing much harm to me.
There's no trauma in that sense.
No.
Yeah.
And I would be a sensitive person regardless because I'm an artist. So, I mean, I have to come to terms with that, and my partner needs to come to terms with that.
Sure. No, absolutely wonderful. You know, we've had so many conversations, like you said, and thank you for mentioning over the last 1 year. But this conversation in particular has been very, very rewarding for me. I've seen different aspects of you. I've seen different facets.
I think only one aspect of me. Ritesh! What is this, Ritesh?
Yeah.
No, I'm not following what you're doing.
Yeah. No, we've been through. But I mean, I think we've also come a long way together.
Yes.
I think health's a journey. I think you have as many failures as you have successes.
Yeah.
And I think the ability to recognize that is what will actually lead you to success. If you have false expectations in that sense, there's no magic, unfortunately.
No, but I'm still going to call you next Saturday.
Fine. You're most welcome. You're most welcome. Always happy to take your call. But no, this has been truly fascinating. I've seen different aspects and different facets of you as a person. I see why you're successful. I see why you've done well in your life. There's so much to learn. I really hope everyone watching has also taken away a lot from this conversation. But thank you. The fact that you came all the way to Calcutta on my one phone call means a lot. Really appreciate what you've done. I hope everyone benefits from this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been lovable to be here. Thank you
Likewise.
so much.
Thank you.
And
Appreciate
a 3 cheers to entire crew back
Yeah,
here
thank
who's
you.
not been visible.